Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be going back to school a little bit.
Oh, back to school.
Yeah, we're cracking open a textbook called Biology Grade 8, Unit 1, Biology and Technology. But don't worry, no tests or anything like that.
Okay, good. Because I think I've had enough of those.
Me too. But what's really interesting about this textbook is that it goes beyond just like the basic facts.
Right.
And it dives into how understanding biology can actually help fuel a nation's development. They
Yeah,
even use Ethiopia as like a real-world example, which I thought was super fascinating.
it is. It is. When you think about it, biology is so much more than just like a subject you study, you know?
Right.
It really is the foundation for so many things in our lives. Think about it. The food we eat, the medicines we take,
Uh,
even just like the overall health of the planet, it all comes back to biology in some way.
totally. And the book really breaks it all down. There's this whole section called Biology for Development, and it talks about how a nation's health, like its agriculture,
Yeah.
food production, even the environment, it's all tied to this understanding of biology.
You know what's cool is how they kind of explain it as this ripple effect.
Oh, yeah.
They show how, like, if you have a healthy population, they're going to be more productive, right?
Right.
And that leads to a stronger economy, which then means a better standard of living for everyone. It's like this whole chain reaction that really drives development forward.
It's like a domino effect.
Exactly.
And they use Ethiopia as this case study, which, like I said, I thought was super interesting because the book explains how their economy, it relies heavily on exporting agricultural products like coffee, flowers,
Yeah.
things that they're really well known for. But in order to, successfully grow and export those products, you need to have a really deep understanding of biology.
Right. It's not just about planting a seed and hoping for the best.
Right. Exactly. And it
Yeah.
really makes you think about like all the products we use every day. How much of that relies on biological knowledge? And we probably don't even realize it.
Right. We take it for granted.
Yeah.
And the book goes even deeper into that, explaining how things like agrochemicals and selective breeding play a role in, you know, boosting crop and animal production.
Yeah, it's all about maximizing those yields.
Right, exactly. So, like with agrochemicals, it talks about how they can increase the amount of food we grow, but it also stresses how important it is to use them responsibly so we avoid any harmful residues and stuff like that.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah. And then there's selective breeding, which is more about carefully choosing plants and animals with the best traits and making sure those traits get passed on to their offspring.
It's like playing matchmaker for plants and animals.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
And then they even bring up genetically modified crops, those GM crops you hear about. They talk about how those are engineered to have certain traits, like resistance to pests or tolerance to herbicides.
And that's a really interesting topic because there's definitely a debate about, the pros and cons of those GM crops.
Yeah, definitely. And the book actually presents both sides of that argument, which I thought was pretty cool. It doesn't shy away from, some of those tougher questions.
It's important to consider all sides.
Right. So it's clear that, biology is essential for a nation to develop, especially when it comes to agriculture and food production. But the textbook also highlights the tools and technologies that biologists use to explore and understand
Yeah.
the living world.
Right.
It's like getting a glimpse into their toolkit.
And it's an impressive toolkit. You've got everything from microscopes, to look at the tiny details of cells and microorganisms to binoculars for observing wildlife from a distance. And then there's all sorts of specialized equipment too, like centrifuges that are used to, separate substances in a lab setting.
It's like a whole arsenal of scientific gadgets.
Oh.
You know what I always loved as a kid? Looking at those diagrams of microscopes in textbooks
Oh, yeah?
and like trying to imagine what it would be like to see the world magnified like 100 times or 1,000 times. It just seems so cool.
Well, speaking of microscopes, this book actually dives into the history of the microscope a little bit, explaining how it was invented and how it revolutionized our understanding of biology.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about how just this one invention, something as simple as a lens, could have such a profound impact on our understanding of the world.
Absolutely. Before the microscope, people had no idea that there were these tiny organisms like bacteria and
Right, that
viruses.
the whole invisible world just opened up.
And not to mention all the intricate structures within our own cells that we never would have known about.
It really just highlights how, Technology and biology go hand in hand.
Exactly. And this textbook goes on to explain how different types of microscopes work, including the compound microscope. That's probably the one most people are familiar with from school.
Yeah.
It uses a combination of lenses to magnify things, sometimes up to 1,000 times their actual size.
I remember using those in biology class, and it was always so cool to see those tiny details come into focus.
Yeah.
Like you could see the individual cells in a leaf or the tiny hairs on an insect's leg. It really makes you appreciate how complex life is, even at that microscopic level.
Exactly. And that's just one tool in the biologist's toolkit.
Yeah.
So we've talked about microscopes. Now let's talk about binoculars. They might seem more like something you'd use for bird watching, right? But they're actually really important for observing wildlife in their natural habitats without disturbing them.
Oh, that makes sense. I hadn't really thought of them as like a scientific tool before, but I guess for studying animals in the wild, it's pretty essential.
It is, and the textbook explains how those binoculars work, using prisms to bend the light and create that magnified image.
Oh, that's cool.
Pretty clever design.
And then there's the centrifuge. I always thought that was one of the coolest pieces of equipment in the lab.
It is pretty cool.
It's like well, the book describes how it spins really fast to separate substances that have different densities.
It is a bit more complicated than that, but the basic idea is that by spinning a sample at super high speeds, the denser stuff gets pushed to the bottom while the lighter stuff stays at the top.
Yeah.
This lets scientists isolate specific parts of the sample, and that's crucial for tons of research.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I was just imagined it for mixing things, but it's way more than that.
Oh yeah, much more.
So we've got these microscopes for the tiny world, binoculars for observing wildlife from afar, and then these centrifuges for separating substances.
That's a good start.
Yeah. What other kind of cool tools does the textbook cover?
Well, it also talks about some more everyday tools like thermometers for measuring temperature, balances for mass, and refrigerators for storing samples. Those might not seem as exciting as a centrifuge, but they're all super important for doing experiments and making observations.
Yeah, for sure. It's easy to get caught up in the flashy stuff, but sometimes the simplest tools are the most essential.
Absolutely.
Well, this deep dive has already been so interesting, and we've just scratched the surface of this textbook.
I know. I'm excited to keep going.
I can't wait to see what other insights we uncover as we explore more of Biology, Grade 8, Unit 1, Biology and Technology.
Let's do it.
So we've seen how biology is like this key player in a nation's development.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But this textbook, it goes even further, and it shows how biology impacts our daily lives in like so many other ways.
It really does. One of the most obvious is food production, right? The textbook really breaks down how biology is involved in every single step of that whole process, from growing and harvesting crops to, processing, storing, and transporting food.
Like biology is this invisible force behind like our entire food system.
It really is.
And it's not just about quantity either. The book emphasizes the importance of quality and safety too.
Absolutely.
Like it talks about how biological studies help us understand things like food spoilage,
Right.
preservation techniques, even just the nutritional content of the food we eat.
It's like using science to eat smart and stay healthy.
Right,
Mhm.
exactly. And speaking of health, the textbook also goes into how biology plays a crucial role in medicine.
Oh, absolutely. One really cool example is Kaso.
Kaso.
Yeah, it's this natural remedy used in Ethiopia to treat tapeworm infections.
Wow.
And it's just a reminder that, nature gives us all these incredible resources, and biology helps us understand how to use them for, medicinal purposes.
That's fascinating. It's like our ancestors were, the OG biologists experimenting with plants and figuring out their medicinal properties.
Exactly.
That's so cool. And of course, like the book mentions, biological research is constantly leading to new discoveries and advancements in medicine.
Right, from new antibiotics to, potential cures for diseases.
It's incredible to think about all the potential there.
It really is.
But the book doesn't stop at, food and medicine.
Right.
It also looks at the role of biology in protecting and improving our environment.
Yeah, like understanding how everything is interconnected, all living things, and how human activities can have a big impact.
It's all about finding that balance.
Exactly. And this idea of good environmental practices really stood out to me.
Oh, yeah.
It's all about, being more mindful of our consumption, reducing pollution, and living more sustainably.
And it even brings up that tree planting campaign during the Ethiopian millennium.
Oh, right. That's a perfect example of how biology can be applied to real-world environmental initiatives.
Yeah, because by understanding how plants and trees, contribute to a healthy ecosystem, we can make smarter choices about how to protect and restore our natural world.
And the book goes on to talk about how biology is helping us develop new technologies to address environmental challenges like climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss.
It's really encouraging to see how biology can play a role in creating a more sustainable future.
For sure. It's like biology is giving us the tools and the knowledge to be better stewards of our planet.
And you know what else? It's not just these big issues. Like, the textbook also brings up how biology is connected to things like cosmetics and beauty products.
It's true. They talk about how natural ingredients like henna, which is used to dye hair, and ensocylla, which is used for skin staining, all come from plants.
Wow. It's amazing how many everyday products have a connection to the natural world.
You start to realize just how much we rely on biology, even in ways we don't always think about.
So we've seen how biology impacts our food, our health, our environment, and even our beauty routines.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
But I want to go back to those cool tools that biologists use. The textbook has some really interesting details, especially about microscopes.
Oh yeah, it even has a step-by-step guide for how to observe a sample under a compound light microscope. There's a diagram that shows all the different parts.
I remember trying to memorize all those parts in school.
Oh, I know.
Eyepiece, objective lenses, stage, diaphragm, so many things to remember. But looking back, it's pretty amazing how they all work together.
It really is.
To magnify those tiny worlds, it's remarkable.
It is, and the book explains it in a way that's easy to follow, even if you're not, a science expert.
Yeah.
It even explains how to adjust the lighting and focus to get a clear image of what you're looking at.
It's like having a little window into an invisible world.
Exactly. And the book also revisits binoculars, explaining how those prisms separate the light and magnify faraway objects.
It's like suddenly having superhuman vision.
It really is. The book uses the example of, like, looking at a bird with and without binoculars.
Oh, that's a good way to illustrate it.
You can see so much more detail with binoculars. It's amazing.
I remember getting my first pair of binoculars as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just blown away by how much closer everything seemed.
I bet. It's that sense of wonder and discovery that makes biology so fascinating,
Absolutely. And then the book revisits the centrifuge, too, explaining how it spins to separate substances with different densities.
And this time, it goes beyond just the basic explanation, and it talks about the real-world applications of centrifuges.
Oh, cool.
Like, they're used in medical labs to separate blood components for things like transfusions and diagnosis. And in research labs, they're used to isolate DNA for genetic studies.
It's amazing how such a simple concept, spinning things really fast, can have so many important applications.
It's pretty incredible. And the book even gets into the different types of centrifuges and how they're designed for specific tasks.
That's like the Swiss Army knife of lab equipment.
That's a great analogy.
So we've got microscopes, binoculars, centrifuges.
All right, the collection.
But what other tools are highlighted in the textbook?
Well, it doesn't forget about those more basic tools that are essential in any lab, like thermometers, balances, and refrigerators.
Oh, right. Even though they might seem like everyday objects, they're super important for doing scientific research.
They really are. And this textbook shows how all these tools, whether they're simple or complex, work together to help us understand the living world.
It's all connected.
It really is.
So we've covered so much in this deep dive, from the big picture impact of biology on development to these fascinating tools used by biologists.
It's been a journey.
What are some of the final insights this textbook offers about the importance of biology?
Well, it emphasizes that biology isn't just some subject you study in school. It's this dynamic, constantly evolving field that influences our world in profound ways.
It's a science that touches every aspect of our lives.
It really does. And the book encourages us to embrace that, to think like biologists and use this knowledge to make better decisions about our lives and the planet.
I like that, thing like a biologist.
It's a powerful way to approach the world.
That's a great way to sum it up. I'm ready for that final call to action the textbook offers.
Let's hear it.
It's amazing how this textbook, Biology Grade 8, Unit 1, Biology and Technology, it takes what could be like really dry information, all those facts and figures,
Yeah.
and it makes it feel so relevant to our lives.
I know, right? It's like they took this complex subject and made it relatable.
Yeah. And it doesn't just tell us about biology.
Right.
It actually encourages us to think about how we can use this knowledge like in our own lives.
Yeah, like they're saying, hey, this stuff matters.
Yeah. And the textbook ends with this really thought-provoking question. It says, knowing how crucial biological knowledge is for development, what are some ways you can apply this knowledge in your own life.
It's a good question, right? It's like they're challenging us to take what we've learned and put it into action.
Totally. So what are some ways, like what are some examples of how we can apply this knowledge to our own lives?
Well, the book kind of points us in a few directions. Like one thing it mentions is being more aware of the food we buy,
Maybe.
thinking about its nutritional value, where it comes from, and like the environmental impact of producing it.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, like using our knowledge to make healthier choices for ourselves and also supporting more sustainable farming practices.
And it's not just about food choices. Right.
Right. It also talks about being more informed about things like GMOs, those genetically modified organisms,
Yeah.
like weighing the potential benefits and risks before forming an opinion.
It's about doing your research, not just accepting everything at face value.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the whole environmental aspect. Like we can use our understanding of biology to become more environmentally conscious.
Yeah. Make choices that are better for the planet.
Exactly. Like understanding how our actions impact ecosystems and trying to minimize our footprint.
That's so important.
It is. It's about realizing that we're all connected to this web of life and our actions have consequences.
It's inspiring to think that, we can use this knowledge to be better stewards of the environment.
Definitely. It's about making choices that benefit not just us, but future generations as well.
This whole deep dive has been a fantastic reminder that biology is, it's not static.
Oh, yeah.
It's a constantly evolving field full of these amazing discoveries and possibilities.
It's exciting to think about all the things we're still learning and all the potential there is for, solving problems and improving our world.
Absolutely. And like the textbook says, it's up to each of us to use this knowledge wisely,
To make the world a better place.
to create a healthier, more sustainable future for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So there we have it, another deep dive complete. This time we explored Biology Grade 8, Unit 1, Biology and Technology,
A journey through the amazing world of life science.
and how it impacts our lives and the world around us.
And remember, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep learning. There's always more to discover in the world of biology.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you then.